Good morning, adventurers. My name is Ben, and welcome to a morning show where I sit around, drink some tea, and talk about D&D. First up for T&D today, I have the "You, Sir, Are a Fish" quote mug from Arthur Morgan. I got this mug from someone on Etsy over a year ago now. I got it from my fiance. One of her favorite games of all time is Red Dead Redemption 2. And I have always thought that this quote is really funny because it doesn't make any sense at all as you are talking to a fish. So I guess it does make sense, but it doesn't make sense that you would be saying it to a fish. Anyway, inside of it, we have some Monk's Blend tea from Beantown Tea and Spices. I've talked about it before on the show, but I don't know that I've talked about it recently. If you don't know what Monk's Blend is, it's a really nice, like, sort of rich, early morning kind of tea. Not necessarily early morning right now, but I was feeling it, and it's not late enough for me to not want caffeine. So let's get into what we're talking about today. I'm excited about this one because of what it is, guys. It's Dragonlance Day. Kind of. We already had the release day for the early access, and the actual release day isn't coming out yet. So pretend I'm holding a book right here. Look at this. Look at this book right here. Dragonlance. Shout out to the Dragon Queen. It is the most recent addition to 5th edition. It is the I think I've said it before, the final chapter in the D&D story for this year, and it is really sort of our lead-in to the sunset of 5th edition, because we only have one more real year of actually, like, getting 5th edition stuff before 1D&D is the thing that is out. And we are still waiting on the next set of 1D&D playtest materials. But rest assured, when they come out, I will be paying attention to them, and I will be doing a little talk about them on this here show. Anyway, let's get into this book. There are likely going to be light story spoilers, light to heavy story spoilers. I will try and flag any of the, like, big ones. But this is a dive into the book. We're going to talk a little bit about what we're actually getting out of it. So be warned that there will likely be some kind of spoiler for the book itself and the story that it contains. But we're just going to kind of go straight down through the order of the book here and just sort of take a look at what it is we're actually getting. So first off, in the sort of introductory section, we have War Comes to Krynn. This is a really useful section for people who are trying to build out their lore that is associated with this world. It makes the very, very good point that you are not actually going to be getting a full-blown look at the country here. This is really a focus on the city of Caliban. I think I'm pronouncing that right. They have a pronunciation guide that I did look at, and now I am here. You're looking at the city of Caliban and how it will withstand the assault by the dragon armies. That is not really a spoiler because that's kind of the whole point of the book. You know that going in. But this thing does have a lot of really good information, including histories, specifics about some of these past events, as well as a general timeline for leading up to the events of this book, which is a really, really interesting sort of piece to have in something like this, but it makes sense because it's also more of like a war piece as opposed to your Wild Beyond the Witchlight or something like that. They also do talk about the gods of this space, specifically the few gods that are actually specific to this setting. You can port them to other things, but they are introduced for this setting specifically, which is useful because they are utilized throughout the story in a couple of different ways. Moving on from that, we have our character creation chapter, chapter 1. They talk about the different peoples of Krynn, the way that the population is kind of split up and spread out in that way. They introduced the race option of Kender, which is one that I was really excited about, and I know that there were people who were nervous about it. It does not have a lot of the things that make people, or made people originally very nervous about it, I don't think. Again, I didn't play the older versions. I didn't see that in effect, but they did take out a lot of that, like, super chaotic aspect that is built into it. They removed that part of the lore from what I can tell. So it is just another race to be thrown in there and to be used as a sort of jumping off point for whatever characters you want to make, especially in this setting, because it is what they're. It's not what they're built for. It's not like Warforged from Eberron where they have to like do a rewrite of it, but it is similar in that it fits well in this section. You also have a pair of organizations that are important here, including the Knights of Solomina, which again, there's a pronunciation section that I did read and I am not remembering it now, and the Mages of High Sorcery. Some information on those, and if your characters want to pursue being a part of that. Backgrounds, including some bonus feats and additional information on those two orders that we just talked about as part of those backgrounds. Feats that, again, very limited, mostly focusing on those two orders, as well as the Lunar Sorcerer subclass, which is just a nice little add-on. I like it a lot. I love the Sorcerer class, and I think this is a good addition to it. Okay. Getting into the actual adventure part now. We skip forward to Chapter 2, the Prelude to War. This is your chapter. This is your level 1 chapter. This is still kind of introductory material, but it is introductory in the sense of the adventure as opposed to in the sense of the world. It gives you an overview of what the adventure is going to be. It gives you a couple of like tips-ish on running the adventure. It also introduces the tie-in board game. If you have the tie-in board game, I clearly don't have the tie-in board game in front of me as it has not been released yet. I currently do not have big plans on getting it, but I might get it just to see and then talk about it, but we will cross that bridge when we get to it. They give you the sort of flowchart of the adventure. I know I showed that off in the first look because I really appreciate those flowcharts, as well as talking about connecting the characters with the addition of a hook to get the characters together, even if they have not started off together necessarily. And then there are a few different little prelude adventures if they are necessary for you trying to like get them into the actual story. If you're kicking off at level 1, I would recommend at least one of the preludes, because if you are just sort of like releasing them to the wolves, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense for them to go to level 2 at the start of Chapter 3. But if you're not starting at level 1, you really don't need to do them. In my mind, you could skip Chapter 2 in terms of the adventure part. It's not super necessary. Chapter 3 is when things actually kick off. This is sort of the quintessential you arrive in a small town for this singular event and fate happens to put you together kind of thing. This is the first sort of open world-ish kind of section. This one advances you from level 2 to level 4, so by the end of it you will be level 4. First of the story spoilers here. You come for this funeral, and essentially while you are there, the village is attacked and you are forced to help evacuate the entire village. With that, it feels like this is your actual prologue to the adventure. In my mind, as I was reading this, after I finished this section is when sort of like the title card ran, if it were like a video game or a movie, where it actually like read out Dragonlance Shadow of the Dragon Queen, which I thought was interesting because it is taking you all the way up to level 4 already, and presumably at this point you have worked your way through, 3 levels. You've gone from 1 to 4 at that point. So it is, in my mind, a soft open into the actual open of the adventure, but you do need to get that introductory sort of kick to really get the adventure kicked off and moving forward. I think that it's a well-written, like, little open world, like microcosm of an open world, because you are more or less contained to this town, but you can do whatever you want to in it. There's not like super specific series of events that needs to happen in a specific timeline. You can have them get there with a week. You can have them get there with a month. Like, you can sort of pad that out however you want to, and it is really a nice little, like, here you go, get into the adventure. Chapter 4, Shadow of War. From here, it's going to be pretty consistently like mild story spoilers. I'll try and flag the heavy ones, but assume mild spoilers from this point forward. This one has you arriving in the major city of Caliban, and it immediately sort of going and reporting what happened. That is the way that it goes when you are part of this sort of crew that, with this kind of thing that happens to you. Worth mentioning, this chapter also takes you up a couple of levels here. This one felt much more linear to me, this section here, as you're reading it, because there are some specific choices that the players have to make in this section to move the story forward. If they say no to a bunch of stuff or yes to a couple of random things, you're out of the story. Suddenly, what you are doing does not matter anymore, and you cannot continue. So the reason that this feels so linear is because there is the sort of required path for them to take, with the addition of some pretty heavy, like, NPC and world pulls that sort of try and drag them in the right direction without feeling too heavy-handed, but a couple of them you're like, okay, we're supposed to say yes to this. At least in reading. It is obviously up to the DM's presentation for you to be able to, like, deal with that, but it does feel a little bit more on the heavy-handed side, in my opinion, for actually, like, pushing them down the right path while still beginning to progress this whole story forward, because you are in what is, again, in my mind, chapter 1, like the first official chapter of the storyline here. When you finish this section, however, moving into chapter 5, it becomes very much an open world exploration kind of thing. The running this chapter section even says it is pretty much up to you where they level up in this section. Maybe try some of these things, and it gives you a couple of examples for things you can use. However, there is no necessary rhyme or reason to the exact way that they need to go about doing something in this. There is an ending point, but they can get to that ending point in whatever path they want to, which is really nice to see. That said, you can burn days and days and days and sessions and sessions and sessions in this section, because there is some pretty cool stuff to look at here. There are 11 overall places, including the final area that you go to, and if you want to stop and hit every single one of them, even if you assume that each one of them takes you 3/4 of a session, which is not the case, you are looking at probably 5 sessions there to just, like, get through all of this stuff. And 5 sessions in real time can be 3 months, so depending on how often you play. Sometimes you get lucky, sometimes you don't. I really appreciate that there is so much versatility in this, but it is it does need a little bit more guide from the DM on that one, just because of the way that it goes. However, I'm gonna go relatively major story spoiler here. It does end with the players getting to see and reforge one of the titular Dragonlances, which is really cool. Followed by the, escape, running back to the main city to get rid of I'm getting ahead of myself here. Apologies. That is a major story spoiler. It happens at the end of the next chapter, because I am conflating the sections in my brain, and I did not take good enough notes on that. So, it ends heading to the City of Lost Names. Jumping forward to chapter 6, which is part 3, essentially, we get back into a slightly more linear section, wherein you are going through the city here. Again, 2 levels in this section. So, you make your way all the way through the city. Here is the story spoiler. You forge the Dragonlance. You are gifted it, essentially, by the god Paladin. And the characters then have access to this major thing. However, that does attract the attention of Dragon Army, which means that they then need to escape the city and get back to the other city. They need to escape the city of Lost Names and get back to Caladan. in order to survive and then warn everybody what is coming. This is at Caliban. I'm conflating the two names. This is sort of open world exploration and then it dives into the very linear ending of the story, which makes sense because suddenly there is the pressure being put on that you have to go. If you don't go, you're going to die. And so there is a very interesting section there that I actually do think is very cool. Which brings us to our final chapter of the story here, the Siege of Caliban. After you return to the major city of Caliban, you are to report. You meet back up with some old friends. You then are set to prepare over the course of the next week for the actual siege that takes place at the end of the story here. Story spoiler, there is a flying citadel that comes and you have to work your way up through it to ultimately fight the leader of the dragon army, presumably emerging victorious and being able to say, hey, we did it, woo, and finishing out. And that brings you to the end of the actual story. In the appendices, as we sort of talked about before, you have some gear and magic items. They are interesting and fun to look at. The major things here, obviously, really are the magic items in the Dragonlance, Flying Citadel Helm, Kaganesti Forest Shroud, and Mirror of Reflected Past. Those are all pretty interesting. The friends and foes have some really cool stat blocks. They have some really interesting NPCs that I am excited to get to use at some point, because I like to port random monsters into my games and either rework them so they work or have them slot in really well. You also have sidekicks, which are just fun additions. They're particularly useful if you have a small party as opposed to a large party, but they're really, really cool. As well as story concept art in Appendix D, and Appendix E comes with maps. That is everything that you will get to see in this book. Let's talk about a couple of other random things that I did not hit on as we went through here. As I mentioned before, there is the tie-in board game, which it really feels kind of like a marketing gimmick because it doesn't have a major impact on the story. However, in that marketing gimmick, you get to utilize it, I want to say it's 12 different times throughout the course of this adventure, where you can actually like set up your map and have your wargamey thing going on for the major sieges. It does not affect the characters directly, which I was kind of trying to figure out how that was going to work when they had originally announced it, because I didn't totally wrap my head around that. But the fact that it doesn't like directly impact the characters so much, you are just playing out the scenarios of the major armies going to war with each other, is actually kind of cool. It's an aspect that we have not yet seen, especially because our rules for mass combat are not super fleshed out. They do exist, to the shock of many people, but they are not like the most fleshed out kind of thing in the world. And it's a cool sort of alternative way to get to do it, and then being able to focus on the players elsewhere. However, it does make you disconnected from it because you are not actually utilizing your characters in the execution of it, as far as I can tell, but I could be wrong on that. Second up, the number of maps that this thing has is actually kind of incredible to me. There are maps for just about everything, and I know that Wizards famously puts a lot of battle maps in their stuff, but it felt like there was a map for basically every encounter you could come across, including the random ones, which is really, really fun because I like to have maps on hand. But like, this was a really good, I believe, a really good sort of assortment of them because of the different areas that you are going to be occupying. They are really interesting, and they're actually very, very useful to just have, and you're able to just sort of like pop them out if you need them. Building off of that, it brings me to the last thing I want to hit on here, which is the DM preparedness level necessary. Obviously, there's a lot going on here, and particularly in Chapter 5, you need to be able to, on the fly, jump to any of 11 different places. However, this book does not feel like one that you need to prep aggressively on. I know that some people were nervous about it because of, some people includes me, because of how heavy the armies could be at certain points. But honestly, in reading it, it does not feel like you have to rewrite the entire book in order to be adequately prepped for this story. It feels like you can kind of like spend a couple of hours reading through, going through, pulling all the stat blocks you need, and just sitting down and being ready to go. The story honestly kind of feels like it runs itself for the most part at most points. And you will need to be able to adapt for players who do not want to stick to what they are doing, but it is not something that is going to be too time intensive. It doesn't feel like. I could be wrong on that, but it doesn't feel like it's going to be overly time intensive to prep for this specific adventure, which I think is really good. We've kind of gotten into the groove on that one recently, so it's not as much of a problem, but like on the original D&D adventure for 5th edition, which was Horde of the Dragon Queen, it was hard. Rise of Tiamat, Horde of the Dragon Queen. It was hard. You had to rewrite basically everything in order to make it playable for you. And so seeing this one with a similar overall theme, like way overarching overall theme, because the Dragon Queen is still Tiamat, it feels a little bit better. But that's just my opinion. So that is the book. At this present time, highly recommend checking it out if you have the ability to. It is really cool, and I'm excited to get the physical copy, excited to see what actually comes inside of it instead of just on the D&D Beyond Scrolly page, but we'll cross that bridge when we get to it. So, getting into the shows that we have for today, from that, we have, in no particular order, The Paper Dungeon, Chromatic Dice, Beyond the Realms, Unprepared Casters, Greetings Adventurers, Bards of New York, Hapless Heroes, Outrun Adventures, Cast Party, Three Black Halflings, Hello from the Magic Tavern, King Leo D&D, Anti-Heroes Anonymous, The Tabletop Tavern, Top of the Round, and League of Lady Adventurers. Check them out. Let them know that I sent you, because again, someday somebody's going to say something to me about it. I'm going to think that it's funny. But until then, I'm just going to keep asking you guys to do it. Yeah, and that is everything I had to talk to you guys about today. So, thank you so very much for making me part of your morning routine. I really do appreciate it, and thank you so much in particular to my patrons. You guys are the ones that have made this show possible. If you're interested in becoming a patron, check out the link in the episode description. Yes, that's all of it. So, with all that said, everybody, don't forget, drink tea, play D&D, and keep on rolling.